Recently, Etsy posted in the seller forum with an update on actions they took in 2023 and some continued actions they're going to take for the rest of 2024 to help start enforcing the handmade policy a little bit more strongly, as well as define the handmade policy a little bit more specifically. They shared a lot of information, so we're going to take a look at it in this video, and we're also going to talk about kind of a concept that can help you with your success of your print-on-demand business on Etsy in 2024 and beyond. All right, so let's start by taking a look at this post from the Etsy seller forums. It is the Etsy 2023 Trust and Safety Highlights and our plans for 2024. I will, of course, link to this post down in the description of this video so you can go check it out for yourself. Now, this post does two primary things. First, it gives a review of things that they did in 2023, but it also looks ahead to the rest of 2024 on what they're planning on doing. First, let's actually just cover quickly their review of what they did in 2023, and that's in the lower section of the article here. So in 2023, we made our automated detection systems more precise, meaning we can more accurately identify problematic listings on Etsy. Because of this improvement, as well as other enhancements, we removed more than double the total number of listings that violated our policies compared to the prior year. So they're saying they removed listings that violated their policies more than double than in 2022. And some of us experienced listings being taken down that actually did not deserve to be taken down because of this increased effort. And actually, it's because they're being removed or taken down by bots, just a program that checks for various criteria and then will suspend a shop if there's enough violations, or will remove individual listings. However, they also focused specifically on the handmade policy. So they go on, we focused on enforcing our handmade policy to ensure Etsy is a place where your special, one-of-a-kind, and handcrafted items can shine. As a result of investments in improving our technology and expanding our detection capabilities, we removed more than 4 times as many listings and suspended 2 times more sellers for violating our handmade policy than the previous year. So again, they're sharing they cracked down on violations of the handmade policy in particular. And again, that's not something that they did with 100% accuracy. There certainly were some print-on-demand sellers affected by this. We'll talk more about how you can try to help avoid getting incorrectly flagged on your listings or your shop as a whole for not meeting the handmade policy or generally their policies. But they continued, in addition to removing listings, we're getting better at keeping items that violate our handmade policy from being seen or listed in the first place. We've reduced the number of policy violating listings that shoppers see by 60%, have more clearly highlighted our policies during the listing process, and are ensuring badges like Star Seller and Etsy Picks are reserved for items that comply with our policies. And they also say that they've reduced the time it takes for cases to be resolved to an average of just 2 hours, a significant improvement from the year before. It means that buyers and sellers are getting the help they need even faster. However, that's not the main focus of this video. We're going to talk more about policy violations and what they're doing for the rest of 2024. So let's scroll back up here and see what they say they're going to continue focusing on for the rest of this year. The first bullet point here on areas of focus for 2024 is protecting you from spam and scams. They say that they're already in the process of significantly increasing efforts to minimize spam and scam attempts on Etsy, including via messages. We're also providing more education and resources to help you protect your shops on and off of Etsy. Now, this one is actually helpful for us. It's a good thing for sellers. I don't know about you all, but I personally have received spam messages in my Etsy seller accounts that then I am expected to respond to in a timely manner because of the Star Seller requirements. So you have to quickly go in there and mark them as spam. Otherwise, it will sit there and count against you for not replying. So it's a good thing if they are doing more to detect and eliminate spam messages. Additionally, under enhancing seller verification, they say they've enhanced and expanded their seller verification process for new and existing sellers, including strengthening new shop onboarding to protect the community. Now, this is something they already have done in 2024. I actually made a video about it a little while back. I'll link to that in the corner and in the description. They have some new seller requirements, including additional verification steps, as well as a $15 charge to open a new shop. So check out that video if you want to know more about those updated requirements for opening a new shop. Now, the last two are what we're really going to focus on in this video. And so we've got evolving marketplace policies. So they say they're constantly evaluating our policies to protect our community from harm, to ensure they're aligned with industry standards, and to increase clarity around what you can and cannot sell on Etsy. This year, we plan to review and update our marketplace policies in adult content, hate, violence, and off-platform transactions. So that one by itself is telling us to expect some policy updates on those specific things. First and foremost, let me just say that off-platform transactions are not something you want to get into. So if a customer messages you and asks for any type of accommodation that would take place outside of Etsy that has to do with a transaction, like sending you money via PayPal or something else where there's some type of transaction going on and they're saying they want to take it off the Etsy platform, you definitely want to say no to that because it can get your shop basically banned for having off-platform transactions. Etsy wants to keep all customer transactions on Etsy. When it comes to the others, there's going to be more subjectivity here. Let's just take a look at an example of their policy on hate. For example, so I'll link to this section of their policies as well. But for example, here is a page from the Etsy seller policies on prohibited items. So they're describing to us things that we are not allowed to sell on Etsy. They will get your shop suspended if you keep trying to list them, or they will just get individually removed. So specifically under hate items, items that promote, support, or glorify hatred, this is what their policy states at the high level here. Etsy does not allow items or listings with violent or degrading language toward people based upon race, ethnicity, national origin, religion, gender identity, disability, sexual orientation, immigration status, or caste. Collectively, those are protected classes. We also prohibit items or content that promote organizations with such views. So these are things you definitely want to be familiar with, and also look for Etsy's announcement posts in case they do make updates to these policies so that you can make sure that you don't have any types of designs or listings that could be considered in violation of their policies. But I will keep my eyes open for any future updates that come to those sections of their seller policies. Now, we do have an additional, more specific update here for the Handmade policy. So here they indicate they're going to continue removing and reducing the visibility of items that don't belong on Etsy. And in 2024, they plan to further expand enforcement of the Handmade policy, including categorizing the policy so it's more clear what can and can't be sold on Etsy. We know it's frustrating for both buyers and sellers when they see listings on Etsy that may not follow our Handmade policy, so we're holding ourselves accountable by tracking and reducing how often buyers come across those items. The key part of this one is that they're planning to categorize the policy so it's clear what can and can't be sold on Etsy. So this is something that could potentially be a big deal for print-on-demand sellers if they come out with an update to the Handmade policy that specifically calls out printable items, print-on-demand items. We're really going to have to watch the language closely if and when they do make an update to the Handmade policy with these categories to make sure that we are fitting into a category that is acceptable under the Handmade policy. Now, at the time of recording this video, I don't have a reason to believe that print on demand will be excluded by the updated categories that are coming to the Handmade policy, but you never know. So definitely stay tuned to this channel for any future updates with the Handmade policy. I will absolutely post a video if we see an update that causes a problem for print-on-demand sellers on Etsy. But what I want to do now is talk a little bit about how you can help make sure your shop is not getting sort of picked up by the bots that Etsy is programming to look for policy violations, especially the Handmade policy, at least as we know it today. In general, this is just a good business practice. And the main concept that I'm talking about here is just try to be different in multiple ways, but importantly, kind of in two specific categories. First and foremost, with your designs that you are putting out there in the niches you are choosing to sell in, don't just release designs that are exactly the same or very, very similar to what other sellers have already put out there. For example, it is perfectly acceptable to use a resource like Creative Fabrica to get elements for your designs. They have a great selection of fonts that have commercial usage rights. They have a great selection of graphic elements that can be used in print-on-demand designs. However, you will also very easily find print-on-demand style PNG designs that are completely finished t-shirt designs. For example, I just searched for graduation here and narrowed it down to t-shirt designs. And if I check the search filtering box to print on demand, then we're gonna see all of these t-shirt designs. These are finished, these are ready to go. I wouldn't have to do anything but download the PNG file of these designs that we're seeing, slap it on a listing on Etsy and put it up for sale. However, there are two reasons why that is not a good idea, in my opinion, and I have talked about this in several of my past videos of why it's a good idea to try and be different. First of all, from a strictly business marketing sense, it doesn't really make sense to just put out a design that other sellers are already offering because there's not going to be demand for 100 listings that all have the exact same design. There's really not going to be a reason for the customer, the shopper, to look past the first couple of listings that are offering this exact same design before they click on one and decide to purchase. At that point, it becomes basically a price competition game at who can sell this design for the lowest price. And honestly, that is bad for all of us because all that does is lower our profit margins. So it is fine to get your ideas for a design based on what's already being sold. And that's why doing research is very helpful. But what you should be looking for is not a design to copy, but you should be looking for what you don't see in the search results. Take this search for example. I did a very high level search on Etsy for bridesmaid shirt. So what you're seeing here in the top search results is largely what? Text-only designs. Some of them are a little bit more jazzy than others, but a lot of these, the majority of these search results on the first page are text-only designs. I think I can count on one hand how many so far have had any graphic elements, any actual design beyond the text. So if I was going to try and break into this niche, I am absolutely not just going to put out a text-only design in a script-style font that just says bridesmaid or something like that. So if I was going to try to get into this niche, I'd be looking to create a bridesmaid t-shirt design that does feature some graphic elements that looks different than what I see here. Because maybe there's sort of a mini niche within this niche that nobody has made a design for yet. And as I mentioned, it's perfectly fine and acceptable to go and get those graphic elements that I need to make my design from a resource like Creative Fabrica, or use a template on a resource like Kittl or Canva. Go ahead and use the elements that are already there to make the process easy for you, especially if you're not a graphic designer. If you're like me and you're just not very good at creating designs from scratch, 100% take advantage of tools like Creative Fabrica and Kittl and Vexels, but it's important to create your own design. Now that's just from a competition and likelihood of making a sale standpoint, but the second reason why you want to be different with your designs is to avoid having issues with Etsy's policies. First of all, to meet the general classification of the Handmade policy, you should be selling a product that you actually created. It's specific to you. And there is an allowance for print-on-demand products, meaning we don't have to literally make the t-shirt ourselves. However, we should have at least made the design ourselves. As Etsy continues to crack down on their policies and get more advanced techniques to enforce their policies, you could at some point find yourself having to defend the designs that you've listed in your shop. And if you have done absolutely nothing to customize that design, to make it your own, then you won't be in a good position to argue that your products are meeting the Handmade policy. All right, now a second way that you can be different and not just like everybody else has to do with your product mockups. So I'm kind of coming back to this bridesmaid t-shirt search that I ran because what I'm looking for here is similarities, and again, I'm looking for what's missing here from existing product mockup photos that are out here. Now, I'm not saying that you have to avoid using common pre-made mockups. However, I would absolutely recommend using different mockups than a lot of what you see. For example, just look at this one row. We have 3 mockups in a row here that are lay flat, and honestly, they look like they could have been, bought from the same seller who probably sells these mockups. They all look very similar. So if you find a niche where you see a lot of very similar mockups being used across, different sellers within that niche, then again, go for something different. Make your listing look different than the way the mockups look for the competition. If you see all lay flat mockups, use a mockup of a person wearing the product. Use services like Placeit. I personally am actually going to start using Placeit even more than I have been in the past because they have such a huge catalog of realistic mockups. As long as you are picking a mockup that has an accurate representation of the item, of the product, then you're going to have a realistic, fantastic looking mockup that's less likely to look exactly like all of the other mockups that customers see in the search results. So again, this has 2 reasons to it. One is from a competitive standpoint, so that your listing stands out a little bit from the competition and doesn't just look like every other mockup here. And the second reason is, again, this can also help you avoid getting improperly flagged by the bots that sort of patrol Etsy's listings, because it is going to become increasingly likely that as part of the handmade policy, one thing Etsy's bots are going to be programmed to do is look for repeated product images across Etsy listings. So if they see 100 listings that all have the exact same mock-up, then even if those are print-on-demand products and they're not finished, pre-made products, they could actually take those listings down thinking that this is just the same product. So in other words, it's got to be a finished product, because how else would 100 sellers all have the same thing? So you having a different mock-up for your design within the niche, in addition to your design being different, helps the data that is built into that image. If there is a program that's reading the images, it's going to look different than all the other sellers in that niche. So that should help you avoid having your listings flagged in case Etsy does start cracking down and using images to actually identify when there are products that may not be meeting the handmade policy. Now, another thing you can do in the space of mockups is you can certainly make your own. If you are creative and you don't mind taking a little time, you can buy a blank copy of a couple different colors of the t-shirt or sweatshirt that you sell your designs on. You can take your own photo of yourself or someone else wearing those t-shirts and sweatshirts and hoodies, and then use those as your mockups, and no one else will have that picture of you unless, of course, you're selling those mockups. And so that's another way to do it where, you don't necessarily have to pay a service like Place It if you don't mind taking the time to make them yourself. So those are two main ways that you can help yourself in 2024 and beyond. If you're not already doing that, I really encourage you all to look at your design creation process and your mockups from the standpoint of trying to do something that is different than the competition, because that can help give you a competitive advantage in a way that doesn't put pressure on prices and profit margins. And it can also help you make sure that you're not getting flagged incorrectly by Etsy's efforts to remove listings that are violating the handmade policy. But like I said earlier, stay tuned to this channel, subscribe to the POD Insights channel if you haven't already, because I will absolutely post additional videos later this year as we see any additional updates coming from Etsy on those categories for the handmade policy or any updates to their other policies. So I hope that was helpful for you. Let me know down in the comments if you have any questions or thoughts that you'd like to share with everybody. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and thank you to all subscribers. I really do appreciate the support. Thanks, everybody. See you next time.